Good to have you with us. You're watching The Big Story. I'm Avni Raja. Our focus over the next half hour is going to be on the latest in the vaccine part of it in India. Well, the government-appointed expert panel on vaccines is currently meeting to decide on the emergency use authorization of the COVID vaccines. The main focus is, of course, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine that's been developed in India by the Serum Institute in Pune. Remember, the Oxford vaccine has already been approved for emergency use in the United Kingdom. But besides that vaccine, the panel will also be considering Bharat Biotech's Covaxin as well. That's India's indigenous vaccine, and that's currently at phase 3 trials. Pfizer will also be making a presentation in this particular meet for its own vaccine. Let me go across first to my colleague Ayushman, who's joining us at this point in time. Ayushman, a very happy New Year to you. What can you tell us about the meeting that is currently underway?
Well, Avni, Happy New Year to you and our viewers as well. We are yet to listen officially as to what is happening, but definitely some positive news in terms of Serum Institute's Covishield. Though it is not coming on record as to what has been the recommendation, the sources are telling us, and like we have reported, that all decks seem to be cleared for Covishield's final approval in the Indian scenario, because we have seen it getting approved in UK. So we are just waiting for the official nod from the government. For now, behind me is the FDA Bhavan, where the meeting is going on of the CDSCO subject expert committee. They are deliberating upon the emergency use authorization application of the Serum Institute is over now. There is Bharat Biotech as well as Pfizer. So currently the deliberations are on, but definitely we can tell you that today there will be one candidate of vaccine which will be approved. The recommendations will be there from the from the emergency subject expert group, I beg your pardon, and the approval will come from the Drug Controller General of India.
All right, Ayushman, thank you so much for joining us with all of those details. We'll, of course, keep coming back to you as and when there are more updates that you can actually get us. But right now, let me go across to my guests who are joining me. We've got Dr. Subramanian Swaminathan, Senior Consultant, Infectious Diseases, Gleneagles Global, as well as Dr. Ram Vishwakarma, Advisor, CSIR, New Delhi. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us, and a very happy New Year to you. Let me start with Dr. Swaminathan. So, Dr. Swaminathan, essentially, this is, of course, all eyes on the vaccine at this point in time. The dry runs are set to be done tomorrow as well, and we could hear of the approval anytime now. If you can first just give us a sense of what will be the process once the vaccine approval for emergency use comes in.
We could not have started the new year with more cheerful news. So obviously a big difference to what we were about 10 months ago. So first, let's celebrate the fact that we are starting it on a cheery note. Obviously, we have a mountain in front of us. This involves not just the vaccine part of it, but also the distribution part of it. There's going to be a lot of details that needs to be worked out on how exactly they're going to go about distributing it to the highest risk population. Obviously, the Western world has decided it's going to be people in key functionary positions, which includes law and order and healthcare, because that's the areas where disruption is going to be most dangerous, followed by people who are high risk, which is the elderly and those who are medically unable to tolerate the effects of COVID. So we need to have a more comprehensive database of all these people. Right now, the government is aggressively getting a list of all the healthcare workers, and they probably already have a list of all the key administrative officials who need to be vaccinated first off. This also means that we need to set in place distribution processes. And obviously, although we are a strong nation with regards to pediatric vaccination, adult vaccination is an area where we actually have very little, if any, strength. So that's going to be a challenge, how we are going to be able to do it systematically. This part actually should be easy because we have a captive audience in terms of healthcare officials and administrators. But once we move to the next section, which is going to be the older people and those who are medically vulnerable, identifying them and making sure that they get it is going to be a little more challenging. I see some bumps in the carpet because, it's a humongous exercise. And obviously, there may be people who feel they should be getting it first and things like that. But it's important for people to realize that our numbers are so low, there's really no reason to panic, and we can go about this very systematically and methodically without losing our heads like how it is happening in the Western world.
Yes, I was actually going to bring that up as well. We are seeing a lot of chaos in some of the other countries with respect to the vaccination drives that are being carried out. And of course, India is a very extremely populous country. So we do have to make sure and be careful that, that doesn't happen. But Dr. Ram, your thoughts on this aspect? The dry runs, of course, are being planned for tomorrow. But there's a lot that we have to keep in mind to ensure, that because there could be a lot of chaos that breaks out if it's not handled properly.
Yeah, so first I will endorse the view of Dr. Swaminathan that today is perhaps the best day in this nightmare that we have been living for 10, 11 months. So I think we should all celebrate. I am not really too concerned about that because government has been working for more than a month. And I have some knowledge about that. I think a lot of plans have gone in background. And I don't see any crisis in our country. Number one, because we have a lot of experience of mass vaccination, and I think many Western countries don't have that experience. So I think that is going to come in handy for our distribution network and hospital chains, and both to public hospital system and private hospital system. So I am really quite confident about the panning out of this, whichever vaccine get approved. And the second advantage that at least two of these three vaccines which are being considered by SEC of DCGI, they are being manufactured in the country. So I think that is also a major sort of relief for us that we are the largest producer for these two vaccines. So I really see that this should go reasonably well. And people are also quite aware. And I think the selection criteria, whom to give first, those have been already decided even before this dry run is started. So I think the overall preparations in our country, because of our long experience of dealing with mass vaccination, is pretty good. So I really don't have concern on that part.
Right. Dr. Ram, if I can just, take that point forward. Yes, we do have a lot of experience with mass vaccinations, for example, but that like Dr. Subramanian was also saying with respect to, the polio vaccine, for example, that we've seen pediatric vaccinations. But in this particular case, the difference is also going to be that many of these vaccines are two-dose vaccinations. And so that will require a whole different structure of maintaining databases and perhaps will need to be done digitally as well. This is a point that Mr. Nandan Nilekani had also pointed out too. What is your view on that aspect? Because this is not like a vaccination drive that we've conducted in the past.
So I think, see, the experience in pediatric and adult, because adult also a lot of vaccination is happening, hepatitis and others are happening. I think those, of course, they are restricted to certain strata of society. So there is an experience. Number two, if you see the first dose versus second dose, if I talk about, say, Covishield, Oxford, AstraZeneca vaccine, the window for second dose is pretty large, 4 to 12 weeks. So you have first vaccination today, then the second vaccination can happen anytime between 4 to 12 weeks. So I think there will be a logistic, because the IT technology that is available where people can be identified. And I would foresee that most of these vaccination may also happen in localized hospital system where some kind of ID is given, time is given when people can show up and then get their shots. Number two, the number of people now infected in our country and number of cases that are going down, that is also that there is a natural immunity also kicking in. I can foresee that from the data that is coming out from also. I think number of people really need vaccination in our country is not so high at this stage, because as you see, compared to Western countries, our numbers are going down, our death rate is going down, while in those countries, actually numbers are going up. So we will have a pathway forward for any of these vaccines approval. The major advantage with the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine at least would be in terms of the cold chain, which is fairly, 4 degree to sort of 8 degree, 6 month normal refrigerator, you can keep it. So I would see that there is enough preparation within the government and the private sector and both public hospital system, and it will be worked out.
All right, Dr. Ram, if I can interrupt you for just a minute, we are getting in big breaking news coming in. All right, the breaking news that's in at this point in time is that AstraZeneca's vaccine has got clearance. Covishield has been cleared for restricted emergency use is what we're picking up at this point in time. The expert group has recommended Covishield to the drug regulator, the panel's recommendation for restricted emergency use. So essentially, the next step now is that the nod has to come in from the Drugs Controller General. The recommendation has already been made, and that nod from the Drugs Controller General has to come in next. But the expert panel has gone ahead and cleared the vaccine for restricted emergency use. That's the big breaking news coming in at this point in time. We're just going to go try and get in our reporter as well to give us more details. But that's what we're getting. But while I have, before we get to our reporter, until then, let me go across to my guests who are still with us. Dr. Ram, this is exactly just what you're talking about. The approval has come in now. The next step will be that the Drugs Controller General will have to give its nod.
Yeah, so I think this is I would consider this is approved because when a SEC, which is constituted by drug controller itself, recommended it, so it says, I think you will have announcement as quickly as in a couple of hours, I would say. So I don't see any. I think this is a great news. I'm personally very happy that this has happened, and this is a very good vaccine actually for Indian situation, and I think it's a great news for people in this country.
Yes, absolutely. Great news coming in on the new year. Dr. Subramaniam, your reaction?
I foresee some bumps in the carpet. I have to disagree in some parts of it. See, as part of vaccination is concerned, this is not like any of the adult vaccination campaigns where we are undertaken, where we do a carpet vaccination of the entire group of people. This is different where we have to prioritize people. Doing it in healthcare and administration, like I said, is capturing, it's a captive group where you can quickly vaccinate them and move on. But once you roll out into the general population, you have two approaches. One, you go area by area and vaccinate everybody, which basically means you are delaying the coverage for the most vulnerable for a significant period of time in certain areas. Or you do the most vulnerable first and then go for the less vulnerable. But here's the problem. You're going to have a lot of people coming and saying, why are you not vaccinating my children? So I think we need to start working on educating the public on who should get the vaccine first and who can get it later. Otherwise, once we start rolling out into the public, if you're not going to do it in a tiered way where it penetrates into the most high-risk population and then downwards, it could result in a lot of grief. And please understand this, fortunately, we are a community which accepts the value of vaccine. So that's really good. We are not having a lot of people saying, oh my God, you're trying to do funny things to me. Thank God for that. But having said that, that could also be a problem for us because we're going to have a lot of people saying, my child needs a vaccine. Why are you not giving my child the vaccine? So that education needs to go out right now.
Okay. All right. Let me go across to Ayushman, who's joining us at this point in time. Ayushman, the big breaking news, of course, the vaccine has been given the nod for emergency restricted use by the expert panel here. If you can take us through the process that's going to happen next.
Yes, in fact, Avni, we are being told by the sources that the emergency use approval has been given, was recommended by the subject expert committee, and it is only a matter of time when the Drug Controller General of India will give the nod for the emergency use in India. And from here on, we can see the letter being written to the center, after which we can see the Indian government in talks with the Serum Institute. They have already been talking to them, and this marks a big step because it is the first vaccine which has got the approval from the drug regulator. And currently, yesterday we had seen the Drug Controller General of India saying that in the new year India will have something in its hand. So the subject expert committee has recommended, in fact, the emergency use authorization, which is also in India called as the restricted emergency use authorization, that is given to Serum Institute. It becomes the first vaccine in India to get the emergency use authorization.
Yes, absolutely, Ayushman. And Ayushman, at this point in time, of course, the nod still has to come from the drugs controller as well. This is only the approval, the nod for the approval that's been given by this, the expert group. But what kind of timelines are we now looking at? What more information can you get us about all of that?
Well, given the context of pandemic, and Serum Institute of India has already said that about 50 million doses are ready with them. So it actually should not take more than 96 hours or maybe 4 to 5 days, the timeline that we are looking at, because currently the government has been in touch with the Serum Institute of India, not just in the recent past, but ever since the collaboration was there with the Oxford University on the Covishield. So from here on, the process will definitely be expedited as to how the procurement of medicine has to be done. And not to forget, Avni, that Serum Institute of India is also a member of COVAX. So definitely whatever they produce, 50% of that, the manufacturing capacity will be going for COVAX, which is for the rest of the countries, and rest 50% is for India. So currently, the entire amount which is available, out of that, the 50% will definitely be coming to India. And from here on, the emergency licensing purpose and the cost modulation will definitely be finalized, which lies in the now. It is for the government to expedite the entire process, but we are being told that about in nearly a week or so, we will definitely be seeing the entire process getting wrapped up.
All right, Ayushman, thank you so much for joining us with all of those details. Dr. Ram, so essentially, you know, from what our reporter just said, that the process now will be expedited most likely. But what can you tell us about what kind of timelines do you visualize now, given that once the approval from the drugs controller comes in here?
Yeah, so I think approval will come very quickly. Maybe it may come tomorrow itself, because normally when these committees give their recommendation, they move very fast. And I must say, in last 10 months, drug regulator, Indian regulator, and I have direct knowledge with that because I participate some of the processes, is that they are very quick, very professional, and I think this will come. Now it's up to them going to government and then sort of doing the logistics part. So maybe like what your reporter is saying, within few days, I think we will have the first shot of the vaccine, you know, moving into clinic. Yeah, so pretty quickly.
Right. Dr. Subramaniam, earlier on, before this news also came, you were, quite skeptical about the implementation of the vaccine. And especially after the first phase of the frontline health workers is done, you're quite skeptical about how the rest of it will be implemented.
See, again, we have to decide how we are going to do it. Most Western countries have decided they're going to tier it into either 3 or 5 tiers and go tier by tier to ensure that you get the maximum benefit of the vaccine. See, obviously, they are grappling with a more difficult situation because they are on one hand fighting the COVID and on the other hand also having to focus on the rollout of the vaccine. We are in a better shape because our COVID numbers are much less and we are close to herd immunity, probably. So our situation is better that way, but our numbers are going to be huge. And second thing is, our first tier of frontline workers is very clear, but the second tier and the tier after that are not very clearly defined. So how is the government going to do it? If we are going to do it, tier wise, then how are we going to do it? It's very, very difficult to do that because we really don't have very good quality data. And also remember that every group is going to start pushing for it. I know for a fact that the Hemophilia Society is saying that they should be in the first group. The Thalassemia Society is saying they should be in the first group. Every group will want to be in the first group. So how are we going to do this? Who are going to be prioritized? All of this needs to come in. And I have one more problem with this. Remember, the vaccine is not 100% effective. So we don't want complacency coming up in terms of the personal protective measures that people need to continue to use even after the vaccine comes out for the foreseeable future. So I think at least till the end of the year, the mask is going to be a way of life, and that's something as well which needs to be reinforced to everybody.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I think that is something that can't be reiterated enough, that just because the vaccine has come in doesn't mean that people can let their guards down. I think that's extremely important. But Dr. Ram, would you like to react to what Dr. Subramanian was saying? Because there are all of these issues that once this first stage of inoculation happens, the next stages are going to be a little more difficult to implement and to ensure prioritization of the second part of it. How will that happen?
Yeah, so I think I would say that, I'm witness to the processes that are happening under the chairmanship of Dr. Vinod Paul from Niti Aayog. Lot of preparations have been done. They may not have been disclosed to general public as yet, but I can tell you all these segregations, layering, these processes have been done. And in fact, a web-based platform has been developed, which will be used to sort of tracking people. So I think let us look at the bright side, because now we have at least one vaccine available. I would absolutely agree with my colleague that when we start vaccination program, we have to actually increase our preventive measures. If we don't do that, then we have a serious problem in our hand, very serious problem in our hand, because we have no data as yet from the clinical trial, because as you know, these have been all compressed clinical trials. The good news is that yesterday, some more data that came from the vaccine that has been approved today in India, is that actually it is also preventing people going to severe illness. So I think there will be some therapeutic segment also where this vaccine will be available. And I think government has also must have planned for those things also. So overall, now the efficacy side is clear. Now, how long this response, 6 months, 8 months, that response, we don't know as yet. So I think we have to increase our measures of protection while we are doing vaccination programs. So that is absolutely critical for the success of any vaccine.
Yes, absolutely. Those are some extremely relevant points. And of course, we'll have to see how this plays out. But I'd like to thank both my guests. And for now, it's extremely good news that's coming in on the 1st of January of the new year, new hope for this year. Of course, we now have to wait for the final approval coming in from the drugs controller. But thank you both of you for joining us on the show. All right, we've got some more breaking news that's coming in. This is with regards to the 39 Indian sailors who are stuck in China. The Ministry of External Affairs has issued a statement on the stranded sailors. This after the stranded sailors appealed for help. The MEA says that the case is being pursued vigorously and the issue is being followed up with Chinese officials, and they're expecting assistance from China very soon. That is what the Ministry of External Affairs has said. And I'm quoting here, given growing stress on crew members and our concern for the increasingly difficult conditions for them, these two cases are being pursued vigorously. Our embassy in Beijing has repeatedly taken up these cases with the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs and also the local provincial authorities, requesting that the ships be allowed to dock and the crew be allowed to be changed. Those are the details coming in, and the Chinese authorities have conveyed that on account of COVID-related restrictions, the crew change isn't being permitted from these ports, but we expect assistance will be provided in an urgent, practical and time-bound manner given the grave humanitarian situation that is developing on board the ships. Those are the details coming in. This is with respect to the stranded sailors at sea at this point in time. And on that note, that's a wrap on this edition of The Big Story. Here's a quick reminder that you can log on to our website, mirrornownews.com. Also follow us on our social media handles.